audit button so that there you go. So we are recording it. So if you could just hit OK, we will go ahead and share that out. We do want to also share a disclaimer. This session is intended to be informational and educational. It does not constitute legal, medical, or financial advice. Certainly consult your legal, healthcare, or financial advisor for advice regarding your personal situation. AARP is also not responsible for the consequences of any decisions or actions taken in reliance upon or as a result of the information provided during the event. Okay, so on to our program. As I said, we don't talk about this topic enough. We don't talk about it openly as it relates to mental health or depression. But we must, in order to take care of ourselves and to care for others, discussions like today's helps us all, and in particular to help reduce the stigma, because we know that there is still stigma around this topic. According to the American Psychological Association, Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander people make up over 6% of the United States population. And of those 26 million people, 15% report living with at least one mental illness in the past year. However, they are 3 times less likely to pursue mental health treatment compared to white Americans. Of this group, older adults face unique challenges leading to higher rates of depression, including cultural stigma, language barriers, discrimination, and the emotional stress of acculturation. Factors such as social isolation, chronic illness, and bereavement also contribute to depression risk, making community-based outreach and culturally competent care essential for AANHPI older adults. Now, many of us care for a loved one who may be struggling with depression and find it difficult, could be challenging to help them. Luckily, we have a wonderful speaker joining us today to help us better understand depression and how to address it. Soo Jin Lee is a licensed marriage and family therapist, executive director of Yellow Chair Collective, and co-founder of Entwine Community. Her work focuses on providing healing for Asian American identities through understanding intergenerational trauma, racial trauma, and immigration stories. Soo Jin has a special interest in destigmatizing the cultural implications of mental health and bridging the gap of knowledge in the mental health field about the unique struggles of Asian American mental health. Welcome, Soo Jin.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me in this wonderful space with community and talking about something that is super important. Okay, so I think you all have done a wonderful job is introducing the topic of depression and what we're going to be talking about today, as well as myself. And so let's go to the next slides. Again, I've already been introduced, but at the heart of what I do is to explore ways in which our intersectional identities impact the way that we interact with ourselves, our internal world, as well as the world around us. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So today's agenda, we know that we're going to be talking about depression. And so broadly, we'll just address and understand what depression looks like or may look like. And then we're going to be moving on to talking about specific cultural barriers in seeking help. And then we'll also be recognizing depressions in our loved ones. And then at the end, we'll talk about navigating those barriers with care. Throughout the talk, I am going to be sharing reflections as well as ways to support both yourself and others with compassion through my own experiences. And so I'll be sharing a little bit about myself throughout this presentation and my own experiences of family members and caring for those that have suffered from depression and currently suffer from depression as well. And so I truly personally understand the issue and the impact not only to the individuals, but to the greater impacts of the family members and the caregivers. And so I'll be talking about all of those elements today. Next slide. So, beyond the professional background that I have shared about and Edie has graciously shared about, I also wanted to share about my own personal background as well. Because, like I had mentioned, I will be mentioning about my personal stories along so that you all feel heard and seen, and that I am also coming from a place of not just a professional, but as a member of the community that also deeply understands what this topic means and how it impacts the families. I am an eldest daughter of an immigrant family household. And this is my parents, and this photo of me when I was a kid. They came to the States when I was 10 years old, and so we all came. I came with my brother, and so the four of us came to the United States when I was 10. So I carry a lot of those lens when I am viewing mental health and mental illness, especially around depression and care for older adults as well. We'll be talking a lot about the cultural implications, but this is the background that I come from. So I am also an immigrant, daughter of immigrant, sister. I am a granddaughter and also a wife as well. So through all of these different identities that I hold, I have witnessed how our cultural values, such as endurance, family loyalty, and humility, have all shaped our emotional health in both really beautiful ways, but also very complicated ways as well. So I want you to have a little bit of this reflective time as well in just thinking about like, okay, as I am coming into this space today, in this community space, learning about depression, what backgrounds, what identities am I holding? What values am I holding as I am listening in about mental health? I'll give you a little bit of moment to do that. And throughout this presentation, as much as I am sharing about me and my experiences and the professional backgrounds as well, I would love if you all folks are okay to also share a little bit of yourselves in the chat as well, so that we're building community in this space today. And so if you'd like to engage in the chat, then go ahead and talk a little bit about, where you're zooming in from today, where you're located. And so I also get to be part of this community today. All right. And then, of course, in the chat, you have also noticed that if there's any questions along the way, please feel free to drop it in the chat as well, so that I may be able to incorporate into the talk today, or we can address it at the end of the presentation as well. Yeah, thank you so much, sharing. So yeah, feel free to write where you're zooming in from today. Okay. Next slide, please. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Amazing. All right. So we're going to go ahead and take a deep breath first as we dive into the topic. Because sometimes talking about heavy topics like depression, our body tenses up without even us realizing. Sometimes we're taking in the information and we don't even know that all of this information is impacting us. And sometimes we're holding in our breath as well as we're talking about some things that we know it's to be a bit heavy. And so I wanted to remind everyone to take a deep breath throughout this presentation. And let me take a moment here to actually lead you all into a very quick breathing exercise so we can inhale and exhale together. So if you're listening in or you're viewing, go ahead and plant both of your feet to the floor if that is something that is accessible to you. And if you feel safe to, then you can go ahead and close your eyes. If not, then you can gaze your eyes upon something that is comforting for your eyes. For me, I have a plant in front of me I like to look at, or maybe look out the window, whatever is comforting for your eyes. So it's totally okay to just gaze your eyes somewhere else off of the screen for just this few seconds that we have. And go ahead and start to take some deep breaths in and exhale slowly out. Take a deep breath in through your nose and exhale through your mouth. But find a pace of breath that is comforting for you. And notice with each breath that you're taking, your body just relaxing just a tiny bit. If you notice any tension in any part of your body, see if you could just breathe into it and let it out with your breath. Hmm. Okay, very good. Come back to this space, come back to my voice, come back to the screen. So, this is a great reminder that as we are learning and taking in information about mental health, that we also can take care of and practice small ways of taking care of our mental well being in the moment as we're learning. Next slide, please. So let's go ahead and get started. We are going to begin, like I mentioned in the agenda, by understanding depression. And so this is the general knowledge around what is depression. Okay, next slide. Okay, I had mentioned that I would love to engage folks in the chat, and if you're willing to, and that's totally fine if you would not like to as well, but if you would like to participate as a group, then I'd love to hear from folks about what image, what words come to mind for you when you hear the word depression. What are some of the things that are coming in mind for you? Or perhaps you yourself have suffered from depression and you know what that looked like for you or how that felt like for you, or you have seen or witnessed other folks. Or it may just be from what you have seen on the screen, in TV or social media. All right, I see some of you. Yes, anger, yeah, sadness, hopelessness, loneliness, mental downer, deep, heavy sorrow, repressed anger, hopelessness just feels like that's an everyday factor these days. Okay. And insecurity. Yeah, these are really, really great. Some of the things that I've also heard folks that are not exactly familiar with depression have also mentioned, they just come to mind an image of somebody that are lying in bed crying all day, uh, or someone that is not able to manage their emotions. They just have like sporadic energies of like crying sessions or get triggered very often, or that someone is refusing to do anything. I've also heard people say that, well, someone with depression just kind of seems like someone that's lazy. They're not doing anything. So these are all things that I have heard. Next slide. Here's what depression can look like. Like some of you have mentioned, there are so many ways that depression can look different. And some of the things that I have noticed when I see somebody with depression is yes, there is that persistent sadness or emotional numbness. And emotional numbness is not exactly recognized in a lot of people for depression. because we all imagine them to be more of a sadness, right? But the emotional numbness means that someone might not even know that they're sad. That I hear a lot of people with depression will say, I don't feel any joy, but I also don't feel any anger or sadness at all either. Even things that used to feel joyful, love, happiness for them, the activities that they used to do that they enjoy, that those things don't bring them that much joy anymore. So maybe it's not just sadness, but I've also seen people with depression describe depression as a kind of an emptiness as well. Like there's nothing there, nothing for me to work towards, work for, live for. It's just muted or flat. And so, this emptiness, not just an experience of great sadness or sorrow, but this feeling of emptiness is something that can also describe depression as well. For a lot of older adults, I have heard folks say, I'm just tired. I'm just tired of everything. And every day I just feel tired no matter what I do. Or I've heard people say, like, what's the point? What's the point in anything? For my own experience, I had mentioned I'll share a little bit about myself too. My spouse has suffered from depression, and the way that he had described it was that when he feels that depression, when he's in the midst of it, it's like all of a sudden the world has gone gray, and it's like I'm navigating through fog. It's a sense of loss and mutedness. For some of the older folks, when I have engaged with them and try to have a conversation, literally ask them anything, and their answer would be just, yeah, no. There's that mutedness in any kind of response from them. There's also the irritability and fatigue that shows up as well in depression. So it's not just that sadness or emptiness, but some of you have already also mentioned this, and I think it shows up a lot in the AAPI community and family members, is that it shows up as frustrations, as impatience, as anger, as if that just any little thing in life is just irritating them. And then there's the fatigue where they're exhausted constantly, right? That even if it seems like they aren't engaged in anything at all throughout the day, that constantly that they're feeling fatigued or restless. For API families, I've also noticed that it may come out when they're engaging with other family members as constant nagging or criticism. So that anger comes out as in a way where they're constantly mentioning about something that's wrong with them, their children, or something wrong in the household. Right? So there's that constantness that is happening. I also wanted to mention about the physical symptoms. So one of the key things that we noticed with some people with depression is that there are some sleep issues, appetite changes, and also the expression of body aches too. Especially in the AAPI community and family members, they will often express just this type of depression as something that's just showing up in their bodies, like something that is not explainable by their medical conditions. Like all of a sudden, they start to have a lot of stomach issues. They're not eating much, or it doesn't seem like food should be impacting, or it's something that they've already been eating all their life. And yet, all of a sudden, they start to have this stomach aches and it's consistent, or this backache. And that's not consistent to what they've been experiencing in their bodies, right? Our bodies often carry a lot of emotional pain when our culture really doesn't give us the space to talk about it, which is very common in our Asian American families. And of course, instead of expressing, like, I feel depressed, some of our older folks may just express it through our bodies, like, well, I've just been having this headache all day, every day. It's just lingering in me now. And with the food, appetite changes. Some of the things that I notice, some of the comments that I notice, people will say is that food doesn't taste like anything much. It's not enjoyable, that there's everything just kind of feels flavorless. And I wanted to note that some of these physical symptoms, again, they're not tied to any kind of medical causes, right? That it's not clear, like why are these changes and aches happening? For API adults, it may also appear as perfectionism, withdrawal, or chronic guilt. I wanted to separate those portions out specifically because there's this overworking theme that also comes up with depression too. We just talked about how depression can look like a numbness where they're not motivated to do anything. Just because they're not motivated to do anything doesn't mean that they're not doing anything either. Sometimes depression shows up where they are lying in bed, just staring at the TV all day. Other times, depression, especially I noticed this in older women, is that depression shows up where they're constantly doing something too, that they can't seem to not do anything. Like they're constantly cleaning the house because they have nowhere else to put that sadness and energy into. And of course, they're constantly seeing and criticizing the ways that this house is as they're cleaning, right? And so it can look a little different too, where it comes out, like I said, as like this perfectionism that perhaps didn't exist. It's not part of their personality. It's something new, right? They may also be disengaging from their day-to-day activities. And so perhaps they used to go to church or engage in temple activities that they no longer do. All right, next slide. So, as I am speaking about some of these ways that depression is showing up, especially in the API older adults, you might be thinking that this actually seems very common because it is. It's very common, especially for immigrant families as they are aging, that depression is showing up in their lives, in their households. And these quiet sufferings of depression is existing in our households and so many of our communities. Why is it that there isn't much help? Because there's a lot of cultural barriers in seeking help, and we understand this a lot. One of the key things that I hear most often when it comes to cultural walls for seeking help in any, not just depression, but for any kind of mental illness, right, has to do with stigma and shame. That mental illness is something that we don't talk about. It's hidden. It's something that I deal with alone. I've also heard a lot of elderly folks say that people will think that our family, not just me, but my family is broken if I express that I'm suffering in any way, especially around mental or emotional care. There's also some fear of being a burden for a lot of elderly folks too, that I don't want to be a trouble for my kids. I've done my job and of taking care of them. They're adults now. They're taking care of their own kids and they have their own lives to live. I'm not going to be the burden. So what happens is that they avoid mentioning anything about sadness or even hide medications that they're taking, downplay the emotional struggles. Right? For example, my dad was also doing this too. He has this great fear about burdening me and my brother, especially as immigrants and all the suffering that they've gone through. They just had such high hopes and dreams about, achieving goals through us. And now that we are living our own lives, to them, they feel like they need to step away from our lives so that they don't become a burden. So, my dad had a hospital visit the other day and he had a small surgery. And I didn't know about it until the day of when my mom called me because my dad was really insistent that we don't know about his medical conditions. It's just something that he feels like it's a burden to us. Right? It ties into those family obligations where they feel like, we have enough stress that we're dealing with, right? And then also, there's this belief that perhaps the emotional pain is something to be endured. It's just internal that we have to endure for ourselves. It shouldn't be expressed. What's the solution for that, anyways? If I talk about it, it's just sharing the pain and there's no solution to it, right? So there's that communication that happens within a lot of the API families too. Again, also wanted to note that emotional language is unfamiliar and very uncomfortable for a lot of families, right? So silence may be something that is also valued as part of the family communication styles too. And so we want to make sure that the silence perhaps might be leading to also loneliness, right? Uh, I also wanted to mention about spiritual and generational lenses. So many elders may interpret depression through a mortal or moral or a spiritual lens. So for folks that may go to church or temples that you need to pray more, this is just has to do with spirituality. Or the idea of suffering, right? The depression, because it is a type of suffering, that the greater spiritual beliefs around suffering can also be considered as well. Right? So for example, suffering can be seen as part of fate, or maybe they believe in karma, right? So that means that they feel that it's not something that I should be treating, right? They see it as just part of their own identity. Uh, Sometimes I hear this as a therapist that some of the elderlies will say that there is this fear of seeking a therapy service is disrespecting the ancestors, or that they feel like they're not being grateful enough because there's that comparison as well. And the last thing I wanted to mention about cultural barriers and seeking help was a model minority myth that many elders take pride in their family's resilience because they have survived and they've survived through with so much great resilience, and they do take a lot of pride in that, right? That we came to the America, we have acculturated, and that we have survived through. Why would I need anyone else's help now? Right? And so those are ways in which that seeking help can become very hard. The pressure to maintain an image of success or strength, especially in front of the younger generations, might be something that feels very important to them. So this all leads to minimizing their struggles, avoiding seeking help, and then, of course, sometimes even wearing emotional exhaustion as kind of a badge of honor too, where they feel proud, like, you know what, I'm suffering, it means that I have done my job. I want all of us that are caretakers to be mindful that these beliefs come from a time when survival depended on silence and sacrifice and endurance, right? And so we want to put a context into the whole story of the society and our identities and our family ancestral stories also when we are talking about depression or any kind of mental suffering that our caretakers are in need of, right? Next slide. So, recognizing depression in loved ones. We talked about just kind of in general what depression is, and also around all the different ways it seems like we are just fighting through so much barriers in seeking help. So, I wanted to go over a little bit about recognizing depression in our loved ones. And go ahead and put a one in the chat if any of those barriers that I've just talked about feels aligned to how you have been interacting with mental health care within yourself or with your family members too. Like if any of that felt like, yeah, this is why it's so hard. Yeah. Okay. It's good. When we are recognizing depression in our loved ones, I wanted to go over first the early signs. We've talked about generally how depression might show up. Uh, Withdrawal, irritability, sleep changes, loss of joy, these are all the signs that we've already discussed. For older adults, depression often begins with very subtle changes that families may overlook. And the reason for that is also as much as our elderlies are saying, well, this is just part of aging, we also dismiss some of the symptoms as this is just part of aging too. Right? I hear that the most often is, well, this is just part of aging. But so we want to be able to figure out, yes, there is some part where aging is difficult and it's part of the aging process. And aging process can have parts of joy too. If those joyful moments of aging are being neglected, then we want to see those as early signs. So, for example, I had mentioned about, if there's any weekly, monthly, routinely things that our older adults have been engaging in and that they stop engaging, that's a key sign, such as going to temples, going to church, engaging in any kind of activities, like if they are part of a mahjong club, right? And they stop going. Okay? Or there's only things to complain about those social events. I know that when the older adults they have a lot more time, they might fill those times with passive things like watching TV, or they are on social media as well, right? Or scrolling through like YouTube. If it seems that they're not exactly watching these passive things like the social media, TV, YouTube, whatever they are on, they're not exactly engaging with those materials, but they're just staring at them. It's just like this empty stare. Then that could also be an early sign as well. I also mentioned about sleep pattern shifts. And so, if they are sleeping a lot more than usual or staying up way too late and their sleep patterns start to change, those can definitely be some early signs as well. Again, some of these things may look like aging, but the emotional withdrawal has is not just a physical slowdown. So the emotional withdrawal are things that we're looking for. I also wanted to mention about the functional depression. The one of the example that I had given about especially the AAPI family women's that I see, older women that I see with functional depression, is that they are constantly doing something, right? Uh, Especially in the immigrant communities, they're keeping the house spotless. They might still be cooking every single meal for their spouse, their family members, or even be helping with childcare too. But they might just be on autopilot. So, this is an example of my mom. My mom had suffered from depression for a really long time. And I remember as a kid, this was when I was a teen, and I didn't have any understanding about depression then. But I remember my mom was the best caretaker because she got anything and everything done, right? She'd get up in the morning, get us ready for school. Lunch was always packed. And then my dad and my mom would drive to work. She'd come home, cook and clean, go to bed. However, I do remember there was this emotional detachment with my mom for a long period of time, especially as a teen. I recognized that even more because I was very sensitive to the emotions, right? And I remember clearly there's this one image that I have of my mom that describes and confirms that she had suffered from depression for me is when she would come home from work. and we would meet for dinner, that her gaze would just be off to space. She's looking at us, her kids, but the gaze was somewhere else. It would be this empty, like eyes that she would have. And I never quite understood why that felt not quite right. It was because she wasn't present, right? Her whole self wasn't really present during dinner times. She was suffering from depression that was taking and eating her away. Her internal world was feeling empty, right? So she had no great sense of love or great sense of sadness, even. She never expressed the sadness per se, but it was that emptiness type of depression that she has had. So these are some of the functional depression that may show up, right? I often might tell families, if you notice your loved ones doing everything as they always did, but that there is no real engagement, then that's worth paying attention to, right? And then the last thing is the cultural disguise, right? The phrases that I've mentioned that I hear very often are, "I'm just tired, I'm fine, just been busy. Everyone feels this way. I'm just getting old," right? Are the things that I hear. I wanted to mention, when you are recognizing depression in your loved ones, that your role isn't to diagnose. It's to stay curious, right? And ask gentle and practical questions. And so for me, I like to say, ask very specific questions and see how they respond back to you. Like, when was the last time that you met with, um, you know, Jenny, who is your best friend, right? Or what time are you falling asleep these days? Or what did you eat for lunch today? And so very specific questions that lets you know that their routine is still going and that there is some engagement with their day. Next slide. So that leads into our discussions about navigating care, navigating barrier with care. And so how do we, figure out how we care for our loved ones, right? Is number one thing is normalize and validate. We hear this very often when it comes to any kind of mental illness, right? That we want to normalize that depression is very common, because it is. It's very common. And things do and can get better. Depression is not their identity. And I like to say that you want to use the language where depression is its own being. And so I'll often throw where, for my families that are suffering from depression, I'll say, "Wow, this is the depression speaking," huh? Which means I'm constantly just separating out depression from their own identity. And then we want to reframe therapy, that it's not a weakness. It's about learning to carry life with more support. So I can help you. We have all this family that can help you, and we have other people that can help us too, all together. And if the concept of therapy is too far from them, is what I also hear very often, is that this whole concept of therapy and mental health treatment is something that is really, really far from my elderly parents. Then it's okay for you as a caretaker to begin your own therapy process. And you can begin by exploring how your loved one's depression is impacting you as well. Okay? Because that opens up the door to model the openness too. That you begin to talk about, how therapy has been helpful in your life. And also, one of the strategies that we like to use at my practice is that we start with the caretakers and we invite the family members whenever they feel ready, right? It becomes a family session. It's not an individual experience, that it really becomes a family experience of how depression is impacting each and every single one of the family members. Bridging the logistical gap is something that also needs to get shared with everyone in the family too, that caretaking should not be done alone, that, as many people can get involved should be involved when it comes to mental health care. And bridging gap can look like finding therapists that speaks the language that your parents speak, navigating insurance, if we're using insurance, and then finding, culturally and linguistically competent therapists, right? And if they need a ride to getting the care that they need, or can the therapist also even just do a phone call if we have had this situation very often where it feels like the adult child in between the therapist and the elderly has to always be involved in the logistical process of helping them with the screen because they're doing telehealth. But sometimes it can also be very helpful if perhaps that if it needs to go through another person in the family to reach between the therapist and the elderly adult, that sometimes we'll just do a phone call instead so that they feel the autonomy of being able to take care of themselves, right? And so there are some of these logistical things that can really help to getting the help that they need. Establishing routine is something really important. And so encouraging movement, meals, and sleep again on a routinely basis is something that I think families can really support with. One of the things that we have done was making sure that my mom is able to go to the gym and she didn't like going to the gym. So there was this we had figured out the logistics and then we figured out that gym wasn't really working out because there was no specific routine of class in which that she can go to and feel like this is a time commitment that she can make because it's just an open gym. And so then we ended up signing her for a dance class instead. And so then that has and it's in the language that she speaks as well, right? And so then that was able to engage her to keep this routine going. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about, and I'm going to dive in a little bit deeper about this, is the intergenerational healing portion. I had mentioned that for us at our practice, we love when the caretakers come in for the healing process, to begin the healing process first, to the therapeutic process, and then we invite those folks that are suffering into the family sessions. Healing happens when families learn also all together in how to understand each other more instead of trying to just fix the issue. And intergenerational healing takes place when we have multiple generations in the household that can get involved with this process as well. And so, next slide. To give a great example of intergenerational healing, I wanted to bring up this research that shows that bringing generations together. And this one particular research was done, well, there's multiple researches done now, but there was a research done about co-locating a childcare and an elder care service in one roof and how it had had a very powerful emotional and mental benefits. Uh, there is a shared site model. So again, there's a childcare as well as an elder care all in one facility. And it exists in multiple places internationally. And there's one particular one actually here in Southern California. I'm located in Southern California in Van Nuys called One Generation. It's this site called One Generation. And they have this shared site model. They operate both the adult daycare and childcare or preschool all in the same location. And what they do is they create intergenerational interactions throughout the day. So it might be art where both the preschool kids and the adults show up and there's one teacher that is, teaching them art, or music where they're co-creating music together, or storytelling, or gardening. So older adults with dementia are also at the site given roles of caregiving and interacting with some of the children. And so it might just be playtime together for 10, 15 minutes. Or if they have infants that get the older adults that have a little bit more capacity are able to hold the infants for about a few minutes. So this daycare model, again, it exists internationally and it explores the ways to build community in combating loneliness and bridging this generational divides, right? It's a great example in which that we can think beyond just an individual, right, as a problem and focus on and having too much focus on the individual's mental illness, which we tend to do a lot in our society, especially in the world of psychology. But we want to really expand ourselves into thinking about the ways that we create opportunities, more care and wellness across different generations, just in our day to days as well, right? It's a very gentle approach that I really, really love. So I wanted to have our last little exercise for us. Next slide. So I wanted you to all reflect and think about the most recent activity that you've done with your family. And then I want you to think about what ways can you create this activity to become an intergenerational healing. Sometimes it's the small things like cooking together. Sometimes it's just even sharing of recipes or something as simple as going to the park and having a picnic, right? I'm curious to hear in the chat, next slide, of some folks to share ideas about what are some of the intergenerational activities that you all can engage in or have engaged in. For me, it's games. And in the weird way, I think this is just kind of my upbringing with my mom who was depressed. There was no games that existed in our household until later when I had become an adult. And I started playing board games with my friends. And so I've always associated board games as something that I play with my friends or with children. I've never considered it as something that I would play with my elderly adults, elderly parents, right? But it's something that I have rediscovered in later part of my life that it's something that I really enjoy doing with my elderly parents is playing games. And some of the easiest games that we like to play, right? Volunteering is really great. Miniature golf, going shopping together for groceries. Yeah, it's like the simplest things. Exactly. And I love how someone said children are the great medicine. Yeah. And some people may not have families. And so the ways in which we can, as a community, continue to engage intergenerationally is so important, right? Okay, next slide. I wanted to end with this. One last things is I hear this very often when I talk about mental health care for elderly folks is that my family seems to be resistant. What do I do? Right? So I wanted to give a small bit of tips for engagements. Next slide. It's number one that you want to lead with empathy, right? As we talked about, there's a whole lens of stories, upbringing, culture, identity, barriers that is getting in the way. That is not them, right? Your family member that is suffering, they're suffering. Also, they're fighting against, we all are fighting against all of these different noises and systems that are working against the care, actually, right? And caring for them. And so you want to lead with empathy. And you can just approach them with, I understand that this is really hard. This is really also hard for me too. Okay? So just share in that pain points. And then we're going to focus on the shared goal, right? And so, again, as I mentioned, really takes a community to be able to get through an individual's depression, not just them. They cannot just try harder to get their way out of depression. And so we want to share the goals with as many people that is going to be supportive as possible, whether that is creating the routine, right? And so, like my mom going to the dance class, one of the thing was just like taking turns between my family members and being able to drive her to the dance class. Like, that creates one less barrier. But also for us, it was a goal of engagement, right? And so in the moments when we're driving my mom to the dance class, it was moments for us to be intentional about engaging her in different conversations about her day, about our dreams and hopes, so that it elicits more conversations besides like, okay, so how did you sleep? What are just the suffering points, right? So engagement is always the goal. And then again, share the responsibility. You don't have to carry it all, and you shouldn't have to carry it all. Even if, and I really want to emphasize is that even if your loved ones aren't exactly ready to see a therapist, that your presence, your consistent presence can't can be the very seed for creating that sense of safety. And so create that engagement and then make sure that you are getting the support. Okay. Because next slide, as a supporter, you all are impacted as well. You might feel helpless, you might feel guilty, that you might feel that compassion fatigue too. It means that you're trying to carry it alone. So make sure you get the help, that you have your support system, and that responsibilities in even the smallest ways possible can always be shared. It is okay to set boundaries. And I know that's a word that can be very triggering for many folks. What I mean by boundaries might not exactly mean that you're staying away from them, right? And that we're setting firm boundaries. I'm not going to talk to you at this hour of the day. It might not look like that. It might just be our mindset boundaries too, that I can still love them, right? That means that it doesn't mean that I have to rescue them too. Okay, so it might be that mindset boundary. And again, make sure that you're seeking your own therapy or your peer spaces. Next slide. I wanted to note that you are not failing because someone you love is struggling. This is something that I hear very often when I work with caretakers, caregivers, family members, is that I feel like I'm failing because they are suffering, that I have done something wrong. Perhaps I could have done something. Mental illness, including depression, is something that just comes upon, and sometimes it also can be genetic too, just like any illness, right? Just any physical illness that come along the way. It's the same. It really is not you. So try to give yourself the compassion that you need to get through this together. Last slide. All right, this is me, Soo Jin Lee, again, and I'm part of Yellow Chair Collective. You can find us at Yellow Chair Collective on any of the social media platforms or yellowchaircollective.com for any of the services. And then if you also have other social media outlets, you can find me personally at soojinlee.mft. Thank you so much for joining me in this conversation today.
Thank you so much, Soo Jin. You covered so much from understanding what depression is to recognizing it, and then ways to navigating the barriers and the care. I think others have said this too, this idea of intergenerational healing is is maybe one that gives me pause to include multiple family members from different generations and to think about coming from it, coming to a place of understanding, not fixing the problem, but really understanding. And that may open individuals up who are suffering from depression to be open to talking about their feelings and seeking help a little more. I wonder, someone had asked, where would we find someone who understands some of these um, Asian cultural nuances related to depression or speaks an Asian language? Where would one go to find someone who may have some expertise in that area?
Yeah, so again, I'm part of a group practice called Yellow Chair Collective. And so you might be able to find a lot of clinicians in under our team's page at yellowchaircollective.com. There is also a lot of directories. And one of the directories that we like utilizing is called inclusivetherapist.com. Or maybe I just want to make sure it's .com and not .org. So let me find that for everyone. Inclusivetherapist.com is a directory. And another one is Asian American Mental Health Collective has a directory as well.
Wonderful. And I know earlier we mentioned your book. I happen to have a copy, Where I
Yay!
Belong, and someone has been selected to win a copy, and it's
Amazing.
Jocelyn Chan. So, congratulations, Jocelyn. You'll be getting a copy of that. I know we have maybe just another minute. Are there any other questions perhaps that we want to cover? Let's see.
I can
What's the
also,
name of the book again?
yeah,
It
I can also
is, yep, Where I Belong.
Mhm.
Simple as that. And I do have maybe one question for you, Sujin. You mentioned playing games with your parents. That's a great way for you to interact with them and for some of that healing to happen. What is one game that you enjoy playing with your parents?
Yeah. So there's this Korean traditional game actually, and it you literally play with sticks and stones. There's you throw the sticks, and depending on where the sticks are facing, whether the forward or the back, you move your little rocks. And the point of the game is you just go all the way across the board. And it because it's a traditional game, my parents already understand the game. It's something that they grew up with. And so I love that I get to learn about it and then we get to reintegrate it as an intergenerational healing.
Oh, that's really cool. Thank you for sharing that. Well, with that, our program comes to a close. I want to thank everyone for joining us. This was such a just rich information. Thank you, Sujin, for presenting all of that information. And now we know how to find you at Yellow Chair Collective. Thank you, AARP California, for hosting this. Sophie Horiuchi Forrester, Arjuna, and Amin helping as well. So thank you all so much.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank you,
Yep.
everyone.
Bye bye.